So complementary angles are a pair of angles that have a sum of 90 degrees. So complementary angles have a sum of 90 degrees, and a sum means that they add up to 90 degrees. So complementary angles add up to 90 degrees. And we're actually going to stay down here and talk about supplementary angles as well. Supplementary angles are a pair of angles that have a sum of 180 degrees. And I'm going to give you some tips on how to remember those two. If we look at the word complementary and the word supplementary, complementary starts with a C, supplementary starts with an S. If you think about the alphabet, C comes before S in the alphabet. And if you think about numbers, 90 degrees comes before 180 degrees. So you can remember C comes before S, 90 comes before 180. Another way to remember complementary and supplementary is complementary angles are a quarter. Complementary quarter both start with C, and in corners it's 90 degrees. And then for supplementary angles, it starts with an S. You can think about a straight line. Supplementary angles and straight lines are exactly 180 degrees. So we're going to jump up to our diagram here. And in our diagram, we're going to actually start off with our supplementary angle. I want to find a pair of angles that have a sum of 180 degrees. So 180 degrees is a straight line. So I know eventually I'm going to have to go across this entire line. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight angle AFC. And I'm also going to highlight angle CFE. So angle AFC, and this is an and symbol, angle CFE. If I were to put this blue angle right here together with this orange angle right here, they're like right next to each other, and you can see they share one side. These two angles together would add up to 180 degrees, which is what a supplementary angle is. Now, complementary angles, this time we're looking for two angles that add up to 90 degrees. I am recalling from earlier that I believe this angle right here, we double checked that and we counted 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 degrees. So that is a right angle right there. Complementary angles have to add up to 90 degrees. So what I'm going to do is take a look at how I could divide this angle into two separate angles. I have this angle right here that goes from B to F to C. And then I also have this other angle right here that goes from C to F to D. And if you were to put those two angles together, they would add up to 90 degrees. So we would say angle BFC and angle CFD are complementary angles, because when you put the two of them together, they add up to 90 degrees. Flip to the next page. And our directions here tell us to use what you know about complementary and supplementary angles to write an equation to find the missing angle, measure x. So looking at problem number 1 right here, I see a straight line. And anytime I'm working with straight lines, it has to equal 180 degrees. So I know that this entire line right here is 180 degrees. So I'm going to start with 180 degrees. And I know part of this angle is 136 degrees. I want to know what's left over for x. So I'm going to do 180 minus 136 degrees. And that will tell me what's left over, or what's remaining for my value for x. So if I do 180 minus 136, I'm getting that there are 44 degrees left over to be equal to x. So my answer would be x equals 44 degrees. If I look at example 2, this time I don't have a straight line. This time I actually have a 90-degree angle. So we would say that these are complementary. And complementary angles, whenever you've got the corner in this box right here in the corner, means 90 degrees. So we know that this entire angle is 90 degrees. The entire piece is 90 degrees, and we know that this small part of it right here is 74 degrees. So if I take away 74 degrees, it tells me how many degrees I have left over to represent x. So 90 minus 74 gives me 16 degrees left over for x. All right, so you've got a couple practice problems here. I want you to pause the video, practice 3 and 4, and then press play to hear me go over the response. All right, so for question number 3, we know that the measure, that little m stands for measure, we know that the measure of angle 1, so angle 1 right here, is 42 and 8/10 degrees. Our job is to figure out what is angle 2. Since this forms a right angle, those are complementary, so I'm going to start with 90 degrees. I'm going to subtract my 42 and 8/10 degrees, and that lets me know how much is left over to represent angle 2. So I don't mind if you use a calculator. We're going to do 90 minus 42 and 8/10. And when I do that subtraction, I am left with 47 and 2/10 degrees left over for angle 2. And then question C says, how do you know? Well, I know this because these are complementary angles. So my justification could be complementary angles. And complementary angles add up to 90 degrees. Number 4, when I take a look at this, I'm seeing a straight line. So with a straight line, it's got to be 180 degrees. I know that angle 2 right here is 65 and 6/10. So I'm going to subtract my 65 and 6/10. And that will tell me how much is left over for angle 1. So I'm at 180 minus 65 and 6/10. And I have 114 and 4/10 degrees left over for angle 1. And for your justification, how do you know? These would be supplementary angles. Remember, supplementary angles are a straight line or a straight angle, 180 degrees. And for examples 5 and 6, we have to draw a picture to represent the situation below and write an equation to solve. So we're going to be drawing the picture before we actually solve these. So number 5 says 2 angles are complementary. As soon as I see the word complementary, I'm thinking complementary corner 90 degrees. So I'm going to go ahead and draw a 90-degree angle here. And I'm going to put a box in the corner to represent that's 90 degrees. That's what that box stands for. And then if I have 2 angles that are complementary, that means that somewhere in here, I've got this line being drawn that's splitting this into 2 complementary angles that add up to 90 degrees. It says one of the angle measures 15 degrees. It doesn't matter which angle, but I'm going to go ahead and label this angle as 15 degrees. And our job is to figure out what is the measure of the second angle. So I'm going to call this x because I don't know how big that is. Complementary angles are 90 degrees. So I'm going to start with 90 degrees. I'm going to take away the 15 degrees that I already know. And that's going to tell me the remaining degrees left over for x. 90 minus 15 would be 75 degrees. So this remaining angle is 75 degrees. And last but not least, question number 6 says angle ABC and angle DBE are supplementary. As soon as I see the word supplementary, I know supplementary, straight line, 180 degrees. So I'm going to go ahead and draw a straight line for myself here. And we've got 2 supplementary angles. So then I'm going to go ahead and draw an angle in here somewhere. So I can see that this is divided into two different angles. If the measure of angle ABE, so I'm going to start A, B, the letter in the middle is always in the center, ABE, and from A to B to E is 61 degrees. So I'm going to label that 61 degrees. And our job is to figure out what's the measure of angle DBE. So I already have the B and the E. I'm going to add the D out here. And I'm going to label angle DBE as X because I don't know how big that angle is. For my equation, I'm going to start with 180 degrees. I'm going to subtract the 61 degrees that I already know. And that will tell me what's left over for my remaining angle X. So if I do 180 minus 60, I get 120. Take away one more is 119 degrees for X. And I want you to go and pause the video, summarize today's lesson, try your best to use some good vocabulary in there. And then once you're finished, you can press play to hear me go over my response. So if I had to summarize today's lesson, two vocabulary words that really come to mind for me would be complementary and supplementary. And your summarization could say that complementary angles add up to 90 degrees and supplementary angles add up to 180 degrees. You could also refer back to our discussion about acute and obtuse angles and say that an acute angle is an angle less than 90 degrees. An obtuse angle is between 90 and 180, and a right angle is exactly 90 degrees.